Of course, the Democrats want a budget today. I would say that if we put a budget forward today, they probably wouldn't like it. So us finishing the negotiation process, I think would be more appeasable to them, and hopefully it's a budget that we can get bipartisan support for. And the conversations we're having, I feel like that we will get bipartisan support if we did a budget correctly. And that's what we're going to do. There has been conversations that if we get to a point, what does that look like? And of course, that would be what we call a mini budget process. We really don't want to go there. We want to put forth a really good spending plan for the state.
3 weeks into the new fiscal year, House and Senate Republicans are still meeting behind the scenes to work out the details of a $30 billion budget bill. From Goldsboro to Gold Hill, you're listening to the WUNC Politics Podcast. I'm Colin Campbell, WUNC's Capitol Bureau Chief. While the legislature has been taking full weeks off this month, there's still plenty of remaining work on the long session agenda. To take a look at what's ahead, I'm joined by House Majority Leader John Bell. He's served in the legislature since 2013 and represents Goldsboro and the northern end of Wayne County in eastern North Carolina. Representative Bell, welcome to the podcast.
It's nice to be with you. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the biggest issue remaining for the legislature to resolve. The state budget, as we're sitting here speaking, is about 3 weeks late into the new fiscal year. We're hearing it could be maybe mid-August until there's an agreement. What's the status at this point?
Well, sometimes you would say we're right on track because it's very hard to get a budget done before.
Yeah, the years I've been here, there's not been a whole lot of June 30th agreements out there.
No, there's not. But we have been working forward on the budget process, and we do have a lot of items agreed to, a lot of big items agreed to. But there are some issues that we're still working through, and the biggest one being the tax package and how do we navigate the tax structure here in North Carolina. And so we're still having conversations there. There's a couple other provisions that we've been working through, and it's just a matter of getting those nailed down and get to a good place. I know we've had calls this week. Of course, I'm here in Raleigh today. I'm going to meet with the speaker a little later to start making sure that we're in a good place and hopefully finalize this thing by mid-August.
Yeah, so what's the big tax disagreement? Is the Senate wants to go with bigger tax cuts or sooner tax cuts than what the House is comfortable with?
It was no different than what people saw in the different proposals. Ours, of course, everybody that in our caucus is all about cutting taxes. It's in the manner to do it. We've already got tax cuts in place based off previous budgets. The Senate wants to be a little more aggressive than we do, and we want to make sure that we're cutting taxes, but doing it in a responsible manner so we don't put ourselves in a financial bind.
So I guess there's the worry of, knowing the economic uncertainty. Do we get a recession down the road?
Economic uncertainty,
making sure
recession,
that you don't have a tax cut that you have to then go back and take away from people after you do it, right?
You nailed it. You just solved the whole budget issue right there. When you look at projections that have been put forward, where that fiscal cliff is if you continue to do aggressive tax cuts and revenue slow down or we get into a recession. We're very blessed to be in a state that has continuously grown, even through the pandemics. It's grown by leaps and bounds. But eventually, it's like a tree. We see the tops of trees for a reason because eventually there's a plateau. And so we want to make sure that our state's in a fiscal solid shape to avoid that. And we can do that in a manner where we lower taxes and continue to grow.
Democrats held a press conference recently to criticize the delay, pointing out that it's holding up things like Medicaid expansion and state employee raises. And then we got a press release just this morning from Governor Cooper making similar criticism. Here's House Democratic Leader Robert Reeves.
So again, it is imperative that we come up with a budget that we can get passed. And of course, part of the holdup that we have heard not being involved in the process are things that don't have to do with the budget. The budget itself is what we should be concentrating on and what we should be trying to get past at this point in time. And so I want to echo Governor Cooper's urge to decouple Medicaid expansion from the budget because we're looking at a prolonged standoff, it seems, and try to at least get that part done so that we can make sure that folks that need this insurance are insured. But also we need to keep in mind that everybody in this state is waiting on something from this budget, especially state employees, and we owe it to them to provide the best that we can.
So is there room at any point in this process to split off some of the policy disagreements from the larger budget? Is that even a feasible option at this point if the delay goes longer?
And this is also politics. We're playing politics with this too. Of course, the Democrats want a budget today. I would say that if we put a budget forward today, they probably wouldn't like it. So us finishing the negotiation process, I think would be more appeasable to them, and hopefully it's a budget that we can get bipartisan support for. And the conversations we're having, I feel like that we will get bipartisan support if we did a budget correctly. and that's what we're going to do. There has been conversations that if we get to a point, what does that look like? And of course, that would be what we call a mini budget process. We really don't want to go there. We want to put forth a really good spending plan for the state.
Yeah, so it's the idea that everything sort of works together, that,
It does.
If you move up Medicaid expansion or you move up raises, then that sort of changes the conversation about the lingering items, and maybe you lose some of the pressure to actually get the other things done this year.
Well, but also you look at Medicaid's a spending item. That's an appropriation. It comes with appropriations. It comes with spending, and so that's a budget bill is where that goes. And so we put forth the policy effort that has passed both chambers, and now it's time to get the spending plan right with that.
What's the status of the veto overrides lingering on bills that deal with education, transgender issues, and some other things that the governor has vetoed in the past month? They were on the calendar, I think, the last couple weeks and got pushed back. I think the latest is maybe August 7th is the earliest that could happen.
Well, we put them on the calendar according to the rules of the House, and so you want to give proper notice, and that's clearly explained in our rules. But now it's navigating through to see who's going to be here, who's not going to be here. Do we have the 72 to override? And so we're working through that process now. I know we'll come back in, I believe the 7th and 8th, and hopefully try there. But that's what we're doing now. We've got members that have vacations. We've got some members that have medical leave on both sides of the aisle. And we want to be sure that when we put these bills on the floor, we have 120 members on the House ready to go.
Yeah, is that something that you're stuck keeping track of 72 people's vacation schedules this summer and trying to thread the needle to make sure you can get everybody in one place at one time?
I'm one of a few people tasked with that. We do have a calendar and a breakdown of everybody's vacation, where everybody's going to be, if they're on vacation, who's going to be close. We have some folks that have some medical procedures and when that is, and so yes, we keep track of all that.
Yeah. Do you buy the criticism you get from governor and Democrats that they're just going on vacation and they're not getting the remaining work done this summer? I mean, is that a fair critique, or is that?
It's Thursday in July, and I'm here in Raleigh today. We're working. Yes, I was at a conference at the beginning of the week, but I was also working and representing the Republicans in North Carolina. The speaker's here today. Him and I were supposed to meet before we actually even had sat down, but of course we had the tornadoes hit Nash County and Rocky Mount area last night, and so he's there today. So yes, we're working, not on vacation.
What else is lingering on the House's to-do list at this point? Any other big things you'd like to see get done before the long session?
We've got a couple of conference reports sitting out there, and that we'll have to navigate through. We want to get the veto overrides done to see what we can get overridden and what we can, and then if we can't get anything overridden, how we navigate through that. But the budget's the big piece. The budget's the reasons why we all come up here. And the biennium, the budget is the main focus of why we're here, and so it's imperative that we get that done in a proper manner.
Speaker Moore, and I think Senator Berger as well, mentioned the possibility that there could be casino legislation in the waning days of session. Do you see any appetite from that as you talk to members of the House caucus?
We have, and we've had conversations, big picture conversations in our caucus, and we kind of did a preliminary overview of where members are. And about a month or two ago, when you look at what we call VLTs or video lottery terminals, those conversations have been coming around here for years. It's just kind of getting to an agreement on what that could look like for our state. The casino piece is different. A lot of people start off with, hey, it's about casinos, but this is about a lot more than just casinos. Of course, casinos are a part of it, and they help fund the operations, but we're talking entertainment districts. We're not talking just a casino and a motel. We're talking restaurants, entertainment venues. We're talking water parks. We're talking family resorts. We're talking facilities that are looking at a minimum of a $500 million investment to start with, up to 1,700 jobs, average salary $50,000 a year for an area that is closing Walmarts and Sheetz gas stations. And so those are big economic drivers, and it's all done with zero state tax dollars. We have a lot of companies coming to the state. They look for incentives, which are state tax dollars. This could actually be one of the largest economic development projects ever done with zero tax dollars. But it's got to be done right. It's got to be really examined. The language has to be very clear. And then we have to figure out the hot zones or the priority areas where these entities could go in. But it's a lot more than a casino and gaming.
Is the morality objection that we've heard in the past sort of diminished a little bit by what Virginia is doing? I mean, are you seeing people in your district that want to visit a casino and they're driving over to Norfolk, Virginia or Danville, Virginia and doing the same thing that they could easily be doing and spending money closer to home?
Well, I've not been to the Danville casino, but from what I heard, if you pull in a parking lot, 60% of the license plates are from North Carolina. And so if you go back and look at the documentation that we reviewed and seen, you see all the bettings that are blocked when we have the Super Bowl or big sporting events, and you have, the commercial commercials that run. So you see the tracking that's done there. You see the amount of people leaving our state, going to Virginia, going to other places. And so gaming is more prevalent today than what it was a few years ago. So conversations have evolved. You look at on the video lottery terminal side, that's an issue that's been bouncing around here for years. Our sheriff's association has been working with how to solve this issue because one county interprets it different than the other county, and so there's still a lot of conversations. There's still a lot of there's some concern, but it's a lot more accepted now than what it was. A lot of people have come to the realization, especially after the wonderful example that our friends in Cherokee have done, that these things can be major economic boosters to a region and economic drivers and can fundamentally change the community. You look at what's happened in Cherokee when they put the gaming in place. Look at what's happened to schools, the roads, the community buildings. Their hospital is top notch. These are also really big economic drivers that can help poor regions of our state.
So from what I understand from Senator Berger's comments, that the thought at this point is looking at identifying specific counties that you could authorize, potentially Nash, Anson, Rockingham, possibly something down around the Lumbees in Robeson County. Have you been involved in those discussions at all? And how do you decide, which counties are going to get what could be a big economic driver and which counties are not on the list?
I actually just got the first draft of legislation this week. I've been involved in, I would say, bigger picture conversations of what this could look like and talking with our members and trying to address their concerns. And then we have to identify where the high traffic areas is, because what you want to do is, in a perfect world, you want to put these in locations, one, gear them to Tier 1 counties where it could really benefit. Moving to a major metropolitan market like Raleigh will be a great thing. Could be a driver, but it's not going to fundamentally change a region of the state. Moving to a Nash County, moving to an Anson County, those are big economic drivers. And where your median household incomes are around $30,000 to $40,000, and you're bringing in an entity that's going to employ people from $50,000 to $60,000 a year. So those are big economic drivers there. And plus, you don't want them to cannibalize each other. You want them to be profitable. You want them to be sustainable. And so they have to be evenly spread out in targeted areas where you have high traffic volumes.
The House mostly hasn't introduced any new legislation this month, although it sounds like we could be seeing a draft bill circulating on this casino issue. But there's been one exception as far as the House's action this month, the bill that surfaced in the House Education Committee that looks at a more sweeping version of the already pending Parents' Bill of Rights bill. It's got a lot of provisions that we don't have time to get into, and it's not a bill that you're sponsored, so I won't try to quiz you on 18 pages of different provisions. But one provision in particular on the power of parents over school administration got a lot of attention from Democrats. Here's Representative Julie Von Hafen of Wake County.
I think some of the most worrisome parts are the attack on our superintendents. One part of the bill requires if there's first of all, it creates a new cause of action for parents to sue schools for a violation of what I said the fundamental right to parent is. That's very concerning because that is not a defined term. If they're successful in court and 5 of these affidavits are submitted to a school district, your superintendent could be fired by a parent, basically. That is extremely worrisome when we look at the overall view of what's happening in our school districts right now with the attacks, that we're seeing at school board meetings, on book banning, on curriculum, on hiring, on every aspect of what's going on in our schools. So that one part is probably the most concerning to me.
So this bill was pulled off the calendar for that committee, and as far as I know, hasn't yet been rescheduled. Do you think we're going to see this again this year, or is this perhaps too heavy a lift this late in session, policy-wise?
I've not had a chance to read through the bill. It was a PCS or a post-committee substitute that was going to be introduced, and of course the chairs did pull that. But I have talked to a number of members of our caucus that have really big concerns on the bill, and so it's going to be one that's going to be heavily debated and vetted in our caucus before it moves forward.
Is there a need to sort of revisit this issue? Because as I mentioned, some of these are similar issues tackled in the Parents' Bill of Rights that's already passed. Is there a desire to go beyond what's in that bill that the House and Senate have more or less agreed to, and I think it's just waiting an override at this point?
Well, that's a conversation we have to have with our members. I can't tell you what legislation is going to be pushed. It's made up of how we do business. And how we do business in the House is if the overwhelming majority of folks in our caucus want to see something move forward, we have those discussions. And right now we haven't had that discussion on that bill.
Where do things stand with the proposed changes to the governor's appointment powers? I understand that bill has been in conference committee for a while. I mean, is there still a lot of sticking points between the House and Senate on how you change the appointments to boards and commissions and who gets which seats on the board, whether it's the governor or the legislature?
Anytime you deal with an appointments bill and restructuring appointments, there's always sticking points, and so that process is still ongoing. I've not been a part of that as of yet, but those are always issues that normally get worked out at the end of the day.
And sort of related to that, there's elections bills that came out of the Senate dealing with the potential changes to the State Board of Elections and overall election law. House, as far as I know, hasn't had any, at least public action on that. Is that something the House wants to look at, or is that sort of a Senate thing that may not go anywhere on the House side?
We're definitely going to take a look at it. I've not had a chance to sit down and talk with our election chairs about where we are in the process. I know it was briefly mentioned in caucus, some of the issues that were brought forward in the bill and how we address those. I know that our chairs are vetting those and also probably adding a few more. And so I'm sure we'll get into that process when we come back in August.
Yeah, is that something that could potentially wait to go alongside redistricting? I mean, I assume any major elections changes, you're really looking at wanting to get in place for 2024 and not necessarily the pending municipal elections in a handful of places that are going to vote this year.
I would hope that we would go ahead and make the changes in the standalone bill outside of redistricting.
One other news item since the legislature's been kind of slow this week was a story about House Speaker Tim Moore saying it's his last term as Speaker. What was interesting about that was it was sort of characterized as something most House Republicans have known for a while. You've been familiar with that plan of his for some time now?
I've been familiar with it for a while, and the Speaker and I have had conversations about the future. And he has served as the longest-serving Speaker in the House and has done a good job. And so we just want to be sure that if this is his last term, that he goes out with the accolades and praise that he's earned, because he's worked hard in some trying times. You look at, I don't know if there's ever been a speaker that has served from natural disasters, both in eastern and western North Carolina. He had a worldwide pandemic. These are challenging issues that he's had to govern over. And I think he's done a good job, and I'm proud to support him, proud to have supported him, and proud to have worked alongside him in the last 8 years.
Well, that will leave sort of an open leadership position in the House side as we get into the post-2024 election session, assuming your party is still in the majority. Would you have any interest in running for Speaker following Speaker Moore?
Well, absolutely, and that's no secret. People know that if Speaker Moore does decide that this is his last term, that I would be interested in seeking that position. Of course, I would have to earn the votes and the confidence of my caucus members and the members of the House. I feel like I've got a great reputation. I feel like that I've worked hard to earn that trust, but we still got a long ways to go to get through this session first.
Yeah, what does that process typically look like? I mean, you've been here a few sessions during it. Do people start, polling their colleagues early on in the process of, hey, would you support me for Speaker? Is that something that really doesn't gear up until after the short session and you get a little bit closer to where there's an actual election for the Speaker?
Both. It's politics, yeah. and so everyone's looking at making their next move or how they can move up in their career. And so you'll start seeing some jockeying for positions and conversations and people jumping out in front. But right now, our focus is getting through session, making sure we get a very good state budget in place, and then teeing up for the next election.
Yeah, do you think there'll be multiple folks who have voiced an interest? I mean, it's probably not your place to name names, but in terms of whether this is going to be a sort of a hotly contested speakership election towards the end of next year, if it comes to that.
Of course, there'll be people that want their names in their hats. I was here when I think everybody in the chamber was running for Speaker when Speaker Tillis stepped down to run for U.S. Senate. So I would I would think there would be multiple names involved and a lot of people looking for that opportunity. And I don't blame them. It's an honor for your colleagues to appoint you and elect you to that position. And there's a lot of folks out there that qualify.
Shifting subjects a bit, you've done a lot of work in recent sessions on hurricane recovery after folks in your part of the state experienced quite a lot of flooding during Hurricanes Matthew and Florence. There's been a lot of frustration about the slow pace of the state's Rebuild North Carolina program. I've done stories about it. I've been down to talk to some of the families that are affected. During the latest legislative hearing on the issue, Senator Brent Jackson of Sampson County had this to say about where things stood.
We've asked that you hold the contractors more accountable for their delays. Yeah, but we know that somehow that hasn't actually been done in a meaningful way where they're getting to point, or it doesn't appear to us on this committee as that. We've asked that you do more to do more thorough preparations to allow families to get home more quickly. Yet, it appears your lack of thoroughness has caused significant delays in the program. We've asked that if a contractor can't fulfill their obligations, then those homes should be placed with another contractor who can. And Director Hogsgood, we've asked you to make improvements more quickly, but the changes you have made are too little and seems to be too late. I hope that's an untrue statement moving forward.
So that was back in March at the last legislative oversight hearing that was held on this topic. Have you seen any improvements since that date?
You know, and Senator Jackson and I co-chair that committee together, and we have the same frustration. We have seen movement. There's been folks in my area and other areas that have gotten back into their houses. We've had people that were in hotels out of town have now been moved back into town in the process of moving into their house. So there has been things seem to be trending the right way, but it's still not fast enough. There's a tremendous delay, and you've had folks that have been homeless since 2016, which is unacceptable. And so what we have to do in the General Assembly is we have to, one, we've got to process the way it is now. How can we make it better, faster, streamlined, and get people back into their house, and at the same time work on what we need to do for the long term. I was having a conversation with a member this morning, and she's supposed to send me the names of folks that are still waiting. And so right now we're taking these day by day, case by case, making sure the people concerns are getting addressed and doing everything we can to get them in homes. As we're having this conversation, I had a call last night and text message this morning with Representative Alan Cheshire. Part of his area was hit with another natural disaster, a tornado this time. And so it just seems that every time we get moving in the right direction, we have another natural disaster, and now we're bumping up on hurricane season again. And so we've got to get this right as a state. It's one of the areas that I believe we're not doing a good job in, and it's up to us to make it better. And I've committed to do that. I know Senator Jackson and others have committed to do that. And since I've been here, I'll never forget the day that I was in the back of a deuce and a half, and we were traveling around with news crews looking at the devastation after Hurricane Matthew hit my area. And the victims of the storm just told me, make sure they don't forget us. And that has stuck with me since that storm, and it still sticks with me today. And it's what's driving me to make sure that everybody gets back in their home. And before I leave this building, before I retire and go back into the private sector, I'm going to make sure everybody gets back in their home. And unfortunately, we've had folks that never made it back home.
Yeah, we hear a lot of talk about federal red tape holding things up. What can we do at the state level? I mean, the hurricane season's underway now. It's probably only a matter of time before we get something similar. How do you make sure that, 4 or 5 years after the next storm, you're not dealing with the same issue of these folks who are, as you mentioned, passing away before they can get their homes rebuilt and get back where they want to be?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of red tape at the federal level dealing with FEMA and the programs that come down. And I've had conversations with Congressman Murphy, Congressman Rouser, and others, Senator Buzz, Senator Tillis, even Congressman Molly Nickel, about, hey, look, we really need to fix this. We really need to remove this red tape because it's putting barriers in place of getting people the things that they need to survive, getting back into their home, getting reestablished, looking at communities that I'll just tell you, one of the biggest really gets under my skin is we do all this cleanup, and yet we pile debris 10 feet away from the riverbank thinking that that's enough. And of course, the first big storm that comes through, where does that debris go? It floods and goes right back in. And so we just don't use common sense when we're talking about something to clean up and the proactive mitigation measures. We as a state have to get better at that. You saw us put forward the flood mitigation strategy, the blueprint, waiting for that to be done, working with DEQ to find out how we address and mitigate these areas. How do we move businesses, locations out of these areas that are not flood prone? And then also, what can we do from a natural barrier? Do we do dredging? Do we look at green areas? Can we maneuver rivers and streams to make it so the flooding is not as impactful? Do we build up communities instead of leaving in low-lying areas? One of the big issues that was a plus for us during Hurricane Florence is the highway infrastructure around the 70 bypass that goes through Goldsboro from Johnston County into Lenore County. That road was built up. That road had overpasses. If it wasn't for that road, you couldn't have got into Eastern North Carolina in a direct route. And so that was a vital lifeline. But building roads to a different standard, these are all things we're looking at, and it's a multi-phase process that we have to go through. It's going to take years to do, but it's one worth doing.
Yeah, there's the political will is still there this far after the storms, because obviously everything you just described is going to take money, and
it's going to take money, and we've put forth a tremendous amount of funding to start the process. In this budget, you're going to see more flood mitigation projects, smaller level mitigation projects, and it's not a partisan issue. It's a very bipartisan issue, and it's not a regional issue. I've been out in Western North Carolina, standing on the banks where there's communities gone, and down here in Eastern North Carolina, when the flooding starts, I have a good 5 to 7 days. I kind of have an idea of what's going to happen. In Western North Carolina, it's a matter of seconds. And when that water starts rushing down the hill, it goes straight to the path of least resistance. And unfortunately, we've been to places like Canton and others where it just went through a community. And so it's a statewide issue that we have to address, and that's why we're working as a statewide approach.
I like to wrap up these podcasts with talking about lawmakers' districts. So you're from Wayne County. Where do you like to take folks when they visit you down in the Goldsboro area?
So if you're coming to the Goldsboro area and you want to have a meeting with me, people would tell you I'd take you to a little place called the Laughing Owl. My daughter calls it the Ha Ha Hoo Hoo restaurant, but it's a good little restaurant right in the middle of downtown. We've done a lot of work in downtown Goldsboro. It's brought in a lot more tourism and traffic, and so we like to take people downtown Goldsboro for lunch, but there's also places like Up North Pizza and Breeza. You've got Adams Roadside Barbecue as you're coming in. Of course, you've got the world-famous Wilbur's and Grady's and McCall's, so there's no shortage of place to eat. But if you're coming to my area, one of the events that I highly recommend everyone go to at least one time in their life is Wings Over Wayne, and that's the air show. And when you hear those jets roaring and the hundreds of thousands of people that come into our community, that's an awesome experience and an awesome event, and everyone should take advantage of it, and it's free to the general public.
Oh, that's a good deal, and that's at the Air Force Base Seymour Johnson.
Johnson. We're very proud of the 4th Fighter Wing and the 135th Refueling Wing and the work they're doing there, and the men and women that serve our country.
All right. Representative John Bell serves as House Majority Leader here in the state legislature. Thanks so much for stopping by the podcast.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
And that's it for this week's episode. If you have any feedback on the podcast, feel free to reach out to me through Twitter. I'm at Raleigh Reporter, or you can reach me through our website, WUNC.org. I'm Colin Campbell. Thanks for listening.